Oh yes, roll those dice, you dirty girl.
Hey CJ, what you doing?
Doing some online shopping, son.
What's Board Game Girls Gone Wild?
Nothing, that's just research for the channel.
Oh, okay.
You're home awfully early from school today, wasn't expecting you.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, where do board games come from?
I knew we'd have to have this talk sooner or later. When a retailer and a game designer love each other very much, they close their eyes and they make a wish.
Oh, and then the stork delivers the game to the store?
No, actually wishing doesn't do anything at all.
Oh.
What you really need to give birth to a tabletop game is tons of hard work, conceptual design, artwork, manufacturers, and they ultimately get you to retailers who distribute your baby throughout the world.
So, it's like cloning?
There's something like Actually, now that you mention it, it's a lot like cloning.
Oh, so what's crowdfunding?
You mean like Kickstarter?
Yeah.
Well, we've gone down the rabbit hole this deep already, I might as well explain it to you. But don't tell your mother.
Hey guys, it's the Masters of Boredom here, and we're going to talk today about Kickstarter games and kickstarting your game experience, as it were.
Absolutely. You and I both purchased a lot of games from Kickstarter.
A lot of games. Too many.
Is there such a thing?
No.
All things being said with Kickstarter,
I have an addiction and I need help.
These are all empty boxes, they're not really games. He doesn't have a closet off screen.
Just in that direction, there are two very large piles of games that are still unplayed.
I'm not going to buy any more games for a while. I bought 3 more games.
That's me in a nutshell.
It is.
Anyway, what the hell were we talking about?
I'm an adult and I can stop anytime I want.
I meant Kickstarter. Let's talk about Kickstarter and what it's done for the game industry. Because I think it's done a lot of good things.
It has. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form you should not buy from your local realtors. Keep game shops alive.
Yeah, absolutely buy from your friendly local game store, or FLGS, as they're known in the community.
Absolutely. That being said, Kickstarter is an opportunity to get your game out there if you don't already have a huge company behind you with tons of advertising dollars.
Yeah, and sometimes they use them to get them to retailers by offering retailer packages in their Kickstarters.
In fact, Dice Throne did that. They had a huge retailer pack, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I think the Gate of Relay did that too, from our friend at DPH Games, Dan Hunties. I think he did a very similar thing.
Yep, and that's a great example of a smaller company that has their games all over the place because they market on the internet, and Kickstarter in particular.
Yeah, and they don't really have a distributor deal, so Kickstarter is what's working for them. And maybe it'll work for you too if you're looking to buy a game or two. But we thought we might share our experiences with Kickstarter.
There are some do's and don'ts, as it were.
Yeah, definitely some things we've learned that we thought maybe could help you in your purchasing decisions. So anyway, here's what we got on Kickstarter and what that particular purchase taught us, if anything. My first Kickstarter board game pickup was Exploding Kittens. For me, this was a no-brainer. I was already a pretty big fan of the Oatmeal and his art style and his comics, and I just figured it was a simple card game, it wasn't too expensive, so I figured I'd pick it up. And this is where I learned my first big Kickstarter lesson. Just because a game might have great art and humor does not make it a great game. It's entirely luck dependent, there's almost no strategy involved whatsoever. Exploding Kittens is really more of a bad game that I'll tolerate simply because the cards make me laugh.
I've always been a big fan of Tim Buckley and his comics, Control-Alt-Delete, and when he announced that he was doing a Kickstarter campaign to make an actual card game from his characters, I was really intrigued. I had never really looked into Kickstarter at that point, so that was a good time to dive in. I felt like I trusted the developer of the game because I'd been a fan of his so long and he's always been very consistent. So I wasn't really afraid of any problems, per se, but it did take a really long time for the game to come out. And I didn't realize, I think, my initial purchase with Kickstarter, that there's such a length of time between paying for your product and your product physically arriving to you. That being said, the communication was really good, and I think if you're going to look into a game, that's probably the most important recommendation, is make sure that the person is communicating frequently with updates, because if they're not, that's a reason to be suspicious.
The next Kickstarter game I backed was The Devil's Advocate, and this game looked really good in the video, the gameplay seemed solid, so I bit. And this time the game was solid. We've actually enjoyed a couple of playthroughs of it. It's easier to sway someone to your side of an argument if you know them really well, obviously. So there's that. But otherwise, it's not a bad game. We just haven't played it in over a year. But, you know, I don't feel like I threw my money away.
Dice Throne was the second Kickstarter that I jumped into. I looked at the design, I saw that there were dice involved, and I thought, I can beat Aaron at that, because it involves dice. And sure enough, I have conquered that barbarian, and it feels good. There's a bit of a hiccup with the product actually coming out to the Kickstarter participants before the actual vendors that purchased them, but the developers, being the great guys that they are, actually asked whether or not we were okay with it. And as a result of being honest with the community resoundingly told them, yes, do what you have to do to sell it at the convention, and we'll get our copies when they're available. And that spoke to me. I really appreciated all their communication. There were constant updates with the artwork, and that breathes a lot of confidence into your purchase. If you have large gaps in your updates, or if there's not a lot of artwork, if you don't see a lot of things, you may be getting a subpar product. But that doesn't really change from buying something off a shelf at a store versus buying something from the internet, except that you have to wait a year and a half to find out whether or not you wasted money.
The next game I backed was 5 Minute Dungeon. This is a cooperative dungeon delving game that's really quite fun, and I can't remember what initially grabbed me about it, but it might have something to do with the fact that I like games that can devolve into chaos. But 5 Minute Dungeon starts in chaos and never leaves. It is great fun, absolutely wonderful time. We need to get it to the table more often, but I felt really good about this purchase. This is the first time I made a purchase on Kickstarter that I felt really good about, which might explain some of the failures to come.
So I was looking on Kickstarter for a new deck building game that Jesse could destroy me at instead of Dominion, and lo and behold, Lucky Duck Games had just the answer. Vikings Gone Wild is a deck building game where you're building a Viking village, buying brawlers to fight, defense cards in order to stop the other players from destroying your things, or buying new buildings so you can get more beer and more gold. How much more Viking could you be? We even enjoyed the game so much that we bought the expansions, Ragnarok and Guild Wars, and we'll probably buy even more expansions for it in the future.
Twilight of the Gods. This game taught me Kickstarter lesson number 2. Don't back a Kickstarter simply because someone you like and trust is spearheading it. I like Chris Clue a lot, and he helped design this game. But this game is a lot like Magic the Gathering, which I openly despise. Now, I knew going in that this was going to be a little bit more of a complicated card game, but I liked and trusted Chris Clue. I felt like he wouldn't let me down, even though we've never met, he doesn't know who the hell I am. But I still kind of ponied up the dough because it was him, and that was a mistake. If you like Magic the Gathering and you like the idea of a game like that without all the boosters and expansions and other wallet-emptying nonsense, this might be the game for you. It is just not the game for me. Sorry, Chris, I'm so sorry. Forgive me.
Growing up watching Gundam anime, how could I say no to heavy hitters? A mech war game on a grid, destroying buildings for corporate sponsors. This game looked fantastic. They did a great job updating all of the artwork and showing you as they were making the mechs. And when I finally got these 2 humongous boxes, I was not disappointed in what was inside. This is one of those Kickstarters where they had add-ons that you didn't have to have, but if you're going to have a Gundam War game, you're going to believe I'm going to have some hapsy dice to go with it.
Champions of Midgard expansions. Now, I was really nervous about this, but I hadn't yet been burned by Twilight of the Gods, and I was still riding high from my 5-minute dungeon purchase. So when they came out with this Kickstarter that had both the expansions and a larger box that fits all the expansions and the main game inside it, I bit, and I bit hard. Now, I'm still satisfied with this Kickstarter purchase, very much so, although it should be noted that we've played with the expansions exactly once. So I haven't really gotten my money's worth yet, but I will.
When I heard there was a deck building game where you could fight the Bastards of Hell, how could I not sign up for that? Aeon's End War Eternal was just that game, and the artwork was stunning, the playthrough video looked really cool, and I jumped on board almost as soon as the Kickstarter began. That being said, shortly after the campaign did begin, I noticed the comment section had a few remarks about it being so close to the previous game and how some people were unhappy that maybe product they should have gotten didn't wind up in their game set and they were going to have to buy a second game. And some developers do come out with games almost immediately after their content, so that is something that you just have to be aware of as you make your purchases. You don't have to jump on board a Kickstarter as soon as it begins either. Feel free to let it go for a few weeks and see what people are commenting so you're an educated customer. But don't take everything at face value either.
Thunderstone Quest is a massive deck building game that comes in a box bigger than some low rent housing. Look at this thing. This is huge. It's insane. Anyway, this Kickstarter campaign kind of irked me. In fact, I'm still not 100% certain that I haven't been suckered. My friends really seem to like this game, although I found it passable at best. To be fair, we've only played the beginner game so far. But this Kickstarter taught me Kickstarter lesson number 3. Be wary of campaigns offering extra content for people who pay more money. Now, I don't mind campaigns offering vanity content if you pay extra money. Get your name or your face in the game on one of the warriors. That'd be fun, right? And I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with are games gatekeeping content for the people who pay out the butt. That is not fair, at least in my mind. And it really bugs me when Kickstarter campaigns do this. Now, this was the first time I had fallen for such a thing, but not the last.
So I got an update for Kickstarter. There's a new game coming out, Maximum Apocalypse. Sounds kind of like fun, right? Probably going to be zombies, the usual stuff. Oh, wait a minute. It turns out you get to choose your own adventure, apocalypse style. That sounds like a lot of fun. It's not just a boring zombie game, it's not just a boring alien game. You get to pick different missions and different enemies and play with your friends, and that's a different type of survival game. The video looks really cool and people seem to really like their products, so it was no problem for me to sign up for this one. Some Kickstarters have bonus material that you can purchase with your games. In Aeon's End case, they had a player mat that makes the game setup really easy and adds a lot thematically to the game. It looks fantastic and it didn't cost that much more. I decided I wanted it, but you don't have to make those purchases if you don't want to. The problem with extras sometimes with the campaigns is you don't always get everything you expect. For instance, with Maximum Apocalypse, I got a really nice player mat that I thought was going to be a game mat for the actual setup of the board, as it were. Rather, it was just a single player mat that no one else gets who's playing with me. Seems kind of hoity-toity for one player while everyone else just puts their cards in order in front of them. It wasn't what I was expecting. The only other issue I have with add-ons, like the Kaiju expansion that we unlocked when we bought it, is that it wasn't built into the original game box design. Subsequently, there's no dividers in there for that particular expansion and the extra characters that they came out with. It's always nice to have extra content, but it's always nice to put it where it belongs as well.
Gloom Haven was my second great Kickstarter decision. Now, I wanted this game for months before the Kickstarter offered a reprint at a discount from retail. No-brainer. I snagged it immediately, and it has turned into a twice-a-week get-together with my friends to go diving into this huge world of Gloom Haven. And did I mention this is a 100% diceless RPG? It is glorious. And if Gloom Haven returns to Kickstarter for a third printing, you can bet that I'm going to tell all my friends to go pick it up because this was a steal.
So I'm scrolling through my phone and I get an update. Hey, there's a new game on Kickstarter. That's one of the problems with Kickstarter. It's like a drug dealer. He just drives around in the unmarked van and he's like, hey, you want a new board game? Come here. There's this developer from Poland and it's making a worker placement game with aliens in it and Greek mythology. Oh, I love Greek mythology. Let's get in the van. Production value in the commercial was fantastic. And the explanation in the brief playthrough video that they put on Kickstarter was really helpful. That being said, don't be too drawn into the marketing. Just because someone can afford a good commercial doesn't mean it's a good product. Anyone who's ever bought anything knows that. I haven't had a chance to actually play the game, but I have opened the box and the components inside look fantastic. So if I can ever get Aaron to stop buying video games and board games, maybe we can get Lords of Hellas to the table and actually enjoy it.
Resident Evil 2, the board game, is based on one of my absolute favorite video games of all time. I couldn't resist. Trouble is, like Thunderstone Quest before it, this game withheld loads of extra content for hire and extra pledges to the point where I was disgusted and I almost canceled my pledge. But sadly, even I am not immune to the words Kickstarter exclusive, so I wound up backing for almost everything. And now, the game has to be absolutely fantastic, at a bare minimum, for me to feel like I got my money's worth. And I fear that it won't reach that height.
Jesse and I have been buying t-shirts from T-Turtle for years. So when we heard they were starting a Kickstarter game based on raunchy unicorn genocide, how could we not sign up for that? We may have been wine touring at the time and I may have had a few drinks, but if you're going to play a drinking game, this might be the one. It's simple, it's fun, and the only point of contention I really have is that the expansion pack that came with it doesn't go in the box it came with. Shame on you, T-Turtle.
The Gate of Relay is the only time I've ever backed a game that I had already played. I met Dan Hundies at a con and played the Gate of Relay with him, and it was phenomenal, so backing this was a no-brainer, but I backed at a higher level to get my face into the game. That's right, every time you play the Gate of Relay, you'll see this face. I'm already pleased. I'm over the moon.
Not all Kickstarter campaigns have a ton of production value or fancy components. Spy Fight's a great example. It's a single deck of cards. That being said, it's a complete game. It's simple, it's fun, and it was really cheap. It was so cheap, in fact, that I bought a second copy of the game and gave it to Aaron, that way I wouldn't have to bring mine over to play. It's so quick to play through the game that you can even use it as an opener for game night to get everybody fired up and ready for the next game.
Finally, I recently backed both Fantastic Factories and The Binding of Isaac the card game. While doing research for this very video, I came across both of these Kickstarters and couldn't resist. Fantastic Factories looks like a simple card and dice game that is actually a worker placement game that plays like a puzzle. It's brilliant. And The Binding of Isaac card game is based on one of my favorite video games of all time. The gameplay that I saw looks fun and interesting and new, and I couldn't resist. I have no idea if they'll be great. They look like they will, but only time will tell. One more game to mention. A while back there was a Kickstarter for a Batman miniatures game, and a lot of people assumed I would jump on it. I didn't, for one very big reason. The game was Kickstarter only, which is a huge red flag for me. They could put any old game together, slap a big license on it, and make huge amounts of bucks for a comparatively crappy game, and no one would know because by the time anyone could review the thing, all the purchases would have already been made. So they literally would have gotten away with huge bags of money like actual Batman villains.
The real bullet points I have for anyone who's interested in Kickstarter is do your research on the products and the game developers. I think that it's a great outlet for the developers around the world. Lords of Hellas is from Poland. I probably never would have even heard of it if it wasn't for Kickstarter. So I think it opens up the worldwide market for everyone.
In summation, Kickstarters are gambles, plain and simple. If you're unlucky, you'll have wasted money on a subpar game. If you're really, really unlucky, you'll have nothing to show for it at all.
So some of the things that I've really learned from Kickstarter is do your research on the game developers, pay attention to the comments, don't necessarily sign on right away, but make sure you like it so that you get the updates. And before it ends, if you're still really into it, then buy the game. Don't make a point of passion purchase if you can avoid it. And this is the kind of thing that you can do exactly that. Take your time.
My advice would be to learn the lessons that I did. Don't back a Kickstarter based on art, a theme, or a name, and be especially wary of Kickstarters offering extra content for higher pledge levels. If you're feeling especially ripped off, I would actually recommend canceling your pledge and telling them why you did so. Oh, and be especially wary of any Kickstarter games that are entirely Kickstarter exclusive. That is too high of a risk on every level. So let's talk stretch goals for a bit. Stretch goals are one of my favorite things about Kickstarters. For anyone who doesn't know what a stretch goal is, basically once a Kickstarter reaches the amount they require to be able to ship their game, there may still be time left in the Kickstarter to gain additional money. And what Kickstarter campaigns like to do is create these tiers of stretch goals where if they reach this amount of money, they'll add this feature, and where they reach this amount of money, they'll add this feature. To me, stretch goals are brilliant, and they're kind of the inverse of the problem that I had with Kickstarters that offer more stuff at higher pledge levels. In the fact that stretch goals, the more people you convince to buy the game along with you, the more stuff everybody who pledges is going to get, because stretch goals are typically for everyone. Now, I'd be wary of any Kickstarter content offering stretch goals only to people who pay at higher levels. That is BS on an unheard of level. It's worth pointing out that every Kickstarter I've backed that I'm 100% absolutely satisfied with are games that I already liked or already knew that I wanted when the Kickstarter started. But there are some future classics out there just waiting to be discovered. Just do your due diligence, do your research, and err on the side of caution. No one wants another Evil Dead 2 debacle. Google is your friend. Look it up. So those are our Kickstarter experiences.
We hope you really liked the video, and if you have any questions about Kickstarter, put some comments down below. We'd be happy to get back to you.
Yeah, we're not experts by any means, but we're more than happy to share our experiences and talk with you about your concerns. So please feel free to leave a comment, make sure you like the video, and subscribe to our channel for more awesome board game stuff.
And meanwhile, here's some other content you guys can check out.
Oh yeah, look at these videos. Click on them. Yeah, both of them at the same time.
Double click.
You're in the Matrix. You can do it.